Hi. So a couple days ago, I made a what if, and it was from the Andrew Garfield version of Spider-Man's, and I said, what if Andrew Garfield had actually saved Gwen? And if you go watch it, you can see what would have happened. I listed two scenarios about what would have happened. But today, we're listing only one scenario because I can't think of two, where Spider-Man actually survives Green Goblin, but Green Goblin still survives somehow. So let's get into it. So the scenario we're looking at is Spider-Man jumps out of the way of the glider, and before the glider could hit Norman, Spider-Man uses his webs to catch the glider in midair, and he throws it at the brick walls. It stabs into it, and he survives. And Spider-Man webs Norman up, taking him to Harry, but removes the goblin because Norman still tells him to don't tell Harry, but even though he's not going to die, but you get the point. And Spider-Man respects Harry. Norman couldn't remember what happened as the pain he got from Spider-Man's punching and destroying Goblin would lead to memory loss. So when Harry asked what happened, he'd say he was fighting someone and everything went black and now he was here. Harry was confused of how they got in and just suspected it was a random person who somehow got in that he didn't know the answer. He tried to look at security cameras, but Spider-Man was smart, and when he was coming in, he webbed security cameras. But Harry couldn't tell it's web, so he thought someone was just somehow did that. Like, Harry didn't know what to think. Harry would be shocked and he'd think that, oh my god, my father was attacked and whoever knocked him out brought him here. And somehow disabled cameras with some sticky substance. He'd try and look for the sticky substance, but Spider-Man would be smart and he'd web it back off. He'd web his other web and pull it. That's how he'd do it, and they throw it in the bin. Also, for those who are wondering, when Harry realised the webs on Norman, Spider-Man would have tied him up and then with webs and then knocked him out and then used ropes. Oh wait, I realised I forgot something. He would have knocked him out when he was in webs, and then he'd find some ropes and use them. So just clearing up confusion. In the second movie, Norman would invest, and the rise of Doc Ock would happen, which would be shocking. Spider-Man would know, oh my god, this has to go crazy. Like, what can I do now? And Tobey Maguire Spider-Man would be ready for Doc Ock. Norman would get the glider on, but he'd forget that Peter was Spider-Man, and it would go crazy. Doc Ock would inform Goblin about the information, and after Harry told him, and they'd agree they had to now finally kill him. The fusion reactor would be formed and Mary Jane would be kidnapped to lure Spider-Man in to the trap to kill him. And when Spider-Man was nearly there, Goblin would ambush him. They'd fight inside and Spider-Man would be able to get Mary Jane out by using his webs, and he'd use webs loads and loads to get back, and he'd get out, and when they got away, Norman would bring him back in, and Spider-Man would tell Mary Jane to run, and she'd run to Harry's house to hide there. They'd be fighting, and it would lead to an epic war. Doc Ock would catch Spider-Man and throw him to the ground. He'd be ready to throw Spider-Man into the fusion reactor, and he would, and Spider-Man would use his webs and avoid it. He would punch Doc in the face over and over, and Doc would use his robotic arms to throw Spider-Man to the wall. He'd throw him down as the fusion reactor was ready to swallow him. Spider-Man would duck and dodge it. He'd be ready, and he'd knock out Norman, and he'd remind Doc Ock of what to do and what he told him in the class, and he'd use Aunt May's words, and they'd do it, and Doc Ock would sacrifice himself. But this time, Spider-Man would get out with Goblin, bringing him back to Harry. Harry would really get suspicious of this, and Doc Ock would die. The third movie wouldn't have Venom, but it would have Sandman, and Spider-Man would be fighting Sandman, and eventually Goblin would come back, and he wouldn't be helping Sandman though. They wouldn't have got a truce, so it would be a three-way fight, and Spider-Man would defeat Sandman, and would then be stabbed into a wall by Norman's glider. Spider-Man would die on the glider, and Norman would celebrate an epic victory. He'd be about to unmask him, but Sandman would be so mad he'd punch Goblin away as he wanted to kill Spider-Man. He punches the Spider-Man body away, and Goblin would get so mad, and Sandman would fight Goblin, and Goblin would kill Sandman. The body of Spider-Man would be found, and they'd take the mask off to prove it was Peter Parker, and the Daily Bugle wouldn't be that surprised as how would he get these amazing pictures. But they would be shocked that it actually was. They suspected it, but didn't believe it was true. Miles would get bit by the same spider, and he'd see Goblin take off his mask while he was hiding, and he'd run back to Harry and tell him about this because he needed to tell him at some point. He knew Harry actually was really skilled, and he'd even helped. He had a gun that he owned, so he was pretty armed. Harry would immediately realize that Goblin was the person who killed Spider-Man, which was revealed to be Peter Parker, his best friend. So he gets so mad at his dad, and he'd suit up in all the armor, and he'd say, "This isn't true, I'm gonna fight Miles." But Miles would say, "Why do I have the powers?" He'd say, "You got bit by the same spider, and now you're acting like Spider-Man." But Bernard would say, "It's true. It was Goblin." He'd say how when he took him to the room with all the equipment. Harry would be shocked to see this, and he'd bring all the gear on, and he'd go with Miles, and the two would fight Goblin. Miles would use his webs, and Goblin would almost be defeated. Harry would be down for the count, and Miles would be fighting, and he'd knock him down to the end. Harry would wake up with a pumpkin bomb next to him that had failed. Goblin tried to use it, but Miles knocked it out of his hand. Goblin would send the glider, and Harry would scream, "Look out!" Goblin would jump out of the way. Miles would look behind him and get stabbed into a wall. Harry would throw a bomb. Goblin would catch it, saying, "You don't understand how to use these," not realizing it was activated. He'd look back and see it was about to blow up. He'd try and throw it back to Harry, but he'd blow up and die. And that is going to be my what if of what if Goblin didn't die in the original Spider-Man #1.